This is Bob White. In this segment on how to sharpen things, I'm going to show you how I can sharpen things like scissors, particularly scissors, in just a few seconds. But first I'm going to go talk about the theory of sharpening and the theory of and the way these scissors are built. Now all these scissors here are cheap China scissors. You can get them at the dollar store, whatever, for $1 a piece, or you can acquire them at wherever, yard sales, thrift shops, any place, anywhere. They're cheap. You can get them for next to nothing. They're everywhere. You probably have a half a dozen of them in your house. Okay, when my wife, she had a kennel, and she was all the time, when she was trimming her dogs and you know, cutting their fur, cutting their burrs out of their fur and mats and stuff like that, she was always using these cheap shears because they were just cheap, and she would go through a lot of them because they were always getting dull. And they were getting dull because the dog's hair is full of dirt and grit and sand and whatever else they might be rolling in. And so when she's grooming them and cutting their fur off, the blades are just getting dull, and she had like a dozen, I don't know, a bushel load of these things. And she says, "Is there anything you can do about these things?" I said, well, maybe. I think I know how I might be able to sharpen them. No. So I've been sharpening things in strange ways for years. So anyway, I said, okay, let me have a pair of your shears. A pair that you're not using. And she had like a couple of them. So I took the shears like this, and I just grabbed the other pair of shears, and then I raked across the blades this way, and I would draw the metal out until I could feel a little burr there on the back side, on the hollow ground side. Now, cheap China stainless is soft and gummy, so it's not like hard high carbon steel. So anyway, it's soft and gummy, and it draws very easily. So anyway, I'm not going to show you right now for time, I'm just going to explain. So by drawing it across, it would just take a few seconds, and just a few swipes each side. And when I would close them up, there'd be a burr there, and when you bring them together, you'd see it shear that burr off, and you'd see a little curl of metal come off. And I'd hand them back to her, and she'd, "Oh man, where did you get these things? Can you do that again?" I said, "Okay, well." So I went through her pile of shears that she had and did it that way in just a matter of 5-10 minutes, or at the most. I had probably 24 shears ready to go back into the kind of cutting that she was doing on these dirty-haired dogs. And the way I test their sharpness, okay, now these are just randomly selected things I had around the house, and they've been around for. Now these here, I sharpened before. In another video, I've dulled them back down to where they're not really sharp to speak of. And the way I test sharpness is I'll take a piece of, first a bond paper. You don't have to have bond paper, but just about any shear will cut bond paper. Okay, these are dull, I know they are, but they'll cut bond paper. Okay. Seem to be very sharp, and a lot of times the girls in the salon, when their shears start getting dull, they'll hook them. They'll wrap their fingers around them, and when they push with their thumb like this, it's called hooking, and it puts more pressure, side pressure on these, and then it'll cut. Even when their shears are getting dull, it'll cut the stuff. But salon girls, well, they're typically cutting wet hair. So if you're trying to cut the wet bond paper, this is like copier paper, and it just mushes it over. And even when I'm strongly hooking, it just mushes, okay? It doesn't shear, it just tears. It just mushes through it and tears, okay? It doesn't cut worth a darn, but you go back to the dry stuff, seems to be cutting fine, right? So, my opinion, bond paper is not the test for sharpening. And if you're strongly hooking when you cut, then you can be rest assured that your scissors are real dull. So anyway, that's the theory on how to. Now, to actually sharpen, okay, that's to test. That was the theory on how to test how sharp they are. Now, to actually sharpen them, since they are cheap China stainless, I can really use anything, and because the stainless is soft and gummy, I can use just about anything that's as hard as or harder than the steel to draw across it and to cause it to bring up another edge. Here's a regular cheap China stainless steel. Cheap China, made in China. Anyway, just regular old stainless steel, whatever. It doesn't have to be a spoon, it can be anything. Now, what I like to use when I'm out and about, when I'm on the job working, is I can use whatever tool. If I have a pair of shears I need to sharpen, whatever tool I have that's chrome plated. Chromium is quite hard, very hard. Chrome vanadium steel, you've heard of that. Well, anyway, chrome steel. And these tools have different textures. Some are fine, have a fine texture. Some of them appear to be a little bit more coarse or frosted or whatever, kind of rough. And here's my trusty universal crescent wrench. And this got a real fine thing. But also I may go a little rougher. Here's this thing here. It has a somewhat rougher texture on the chrome plating, and so it'll leave a more ragged edge on the shears, which is what sometimes they work better when they have a ragged edge. And this one here, it's got this knurling, this chrome plated knurling, and that's very aggressive, and that'll really bring up a burr. And typically it's that burr that you're going to be working with when you sharpen these things. So if I was to take this spoon and drag it across, then it's going to leave a burr on this back side here, on the hollow ground side. And this hollow ground side is where I'm going to be, that is where the shearing action happens, right at that edge right there. I don't know if you can see this. I'll try to show it on this. But shears, when they're put together, I don't know if you can see this. I'll rotate it. There is a gap. It's kind of hard to see. Anyway, the shears are actually curved. They're curved one against the other. Some are more prominent than others. So when the tips come together, the shears are cutting like this. Okay? They're not cutting like this. They're cutting like this. They're dragging one edge across the other. And that edge, if you put a even reasonably sharp edge on there, then when this one edge goes against the other edge, then that action will separate the material in between it. Okay, and as the shear starts to advance, the point of contact is up here toward the pivot point. Toward the pivot point, and then it advances. Let me get this out of here. Get better contrast here. That actual point of contact advances along. So there's only one point of contact. There's only one point of contact along this edge here, and it goes all the way out to the tip. And if your tip's not damaged or bent, then it'll cut all the way to the tip. So by putting this edge on here, then that point of contact goes out. Now some of the other people that talk about sharpening shears, they talk about a ride, what they call a ride on here, and that ride is nothing more than a flat surface. And it's been my experience in looking at newly manufactured shears, you can't really hardly see a ride there. That ride being a flat surface, any little deviation of that when it comes together, that flat surface, then that point of contact is no longer a point, it's spread out over the width of that ride, and it'll cause the material between it to, instead of shearing with a sharp edge, it's kind of smooshing because it's a much wider area where the pressure is being applied, and so consequently it doesn't have as smooth a cut. It's harder to work with, harder to cut. And the salon girls, they get tired in their hands and stuff, and they can tell when it starts getting dull because they get tired out of you, and then they start hooking. They start hooking in order to get the cut, and that even makes their fatigue worse. So anyway, well, that's the theory about these shears and how they can be sharpened. And it just takes a matter of seconds to run across these blades with any one of these kinds of material. And you've seen and heard about the butchers and their sharpening steel. They just, and they're back in business with their cutting. So that's the theory about this stuff. So in this next segment, I will demonstrate how to sharpen these scissors in just a matter of seconds. So we'll do that next time.